Welcome back to Worldview. Now, 1 year ago, two journalists were brutally murdered by the Syrian government. Marie Colvin and photojournalist Remy Ochlik were covering the genocide of rebels there by the Assad government. Marie and Remy were two of 90 journalists killed in 2012, and since 1992, 971 journalists have lost their lives as targets by governments, military, and internal secret police for simply trying to do their job. From Mubarak to Assad to Ahmadinejad, the prevailing thought process is if you can kill them, the news cannot get out. And they could not be more wrong, and indeed in 2013, anyone with a cell phone and with a camera can expose all manner of atrocities. These lost journalists are memorialized by a group of fellow journalists who 10 days ago launched the website www.adaywithoutnews.com. It's an effort to gather global expressions of support to see the successful prosecution of perpetrators of war crimes against journalists and to increase public support and support from within the media community for those organizations that are dedicated to this issue. Now, 9 out of 10 of these cases of murdered journalists have zero effect. There are few prosecutions and virtually no convictions against those who killed journalists. And the website has received expressions of support from UK Prime Minister Cameron, who tweeted his support, and the UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon, who recorded a very powerful video calling for action. Joining us today on the program is Aidan Sullivan. By day, he's the commissioning vice president for Getty Images, and I have a special respect for his photographers. When everyone else is running away from gunfire, his photographers run the other way towards the shooters to capture those award-winning photographs many of us take for granted. Aidan's a leading voice in this effort, and it's our pleasure to have him here. Aidan Sullivan, welcome to Worldview.
Thank you very much, Dan.
Now, Aidan, during the 18 days of the Egyptian Revolution, journalists were targeted by El Adli, the interior minister, and Mubarak. And I remember tweeting and talking on the phone with a CNN producer in Atlanta from here, trying to rescue Anderson Cooper and his film crew. We cobbled together a sort of network of tin can and wires to alert producers which streets were safe to duck down in real time. And it only now seems to have gotten worse. So let's begin by asking, how bad is it out there for journalists?
Well, I think the risks have increased dramatically. I mean, I think we're now in a position, specifically in Syria, where journalists are very, very much at risk. They are very, very much targets. And from both sides of the conflict, the Syrian army and the Syrian government are clearly not happy with reports that are coming out. And as we know, Marie, the night before she was killed, sent a report out via CNN about the atrocities she'd seen that day. And it was Paul Conroy, a survivor, who was with Marie in Homs that day, who's absolutely, convinced they were targeted. So this is actual targeting by the Syrian army of journalists because they were doing what they were there to do, which was to report and give us the news of events. But also journalists are targets because of kidnapping. So we're having journalists being targeted and kidnapped by jihadists and groups within Syria. And it's not just Syria. We're focusing on Syria because obviously that's something that we're all looking at the moment. But if you listen to, and we're working very closely with the Committee to Protect Journalists and Human Rights Watch and Reporters Without Borders, there are these targeted attacks on journalists happening all around the world.
This is such a huge issue, keeping reporters and photographers safe. Why don't we hear more about the risks that they face?
I think this is one of the things. I think people just, sit back in their living rooms or sitting with their iPads and they're fed the news on a daily basis, and they don't really need to think about the risks. They just look at a device, and there it is. It's a live report, and they don't actually understand that what's going on in the background. The risks our colleagues are taking are enormous, and becoming even more so.
So tell us about the website and what it is you hope to accomplish with it. With whom are you speaking, and what have the reactions been thus far?
Well, I think the background to this, was very briefly, I was the chairman of the World Press jury for 2012, and we were due to give Remy Ochlik an award. And between awarding him the prize and actually the award ceremony, he was killed along with Marie. And having lost my close friends Tim Hetherington and Chris Honduras the year before, and Marie, who I'd known for some 30 years, I just suddenly thought, this isn't right. We as a community should be doing something. And we were at the UN in New York, and there was a panel discussion which was about the dangers faced by conflict journalists. And I voiced at that panel, well, you know what, maybe it's time that we made it an official war crime to purposefully attack journalists working in conflict zones. And there was a lawyer, a UN lawyer on the panel who said, look, I'm sorry to have to tell you this, but it is a war crime by default, because if you're a non-combatant, you are a civilian, and if you are a civilian, you are covered by the Geneva Conventions. And I said, well, you know, that's great, and thank you very much for that, but I've been in this business for 35 years, and there are people, colleagues here in the audience, how many of you knew that? And no one knew that it was a war crime. And I think this is my point, that, you know, we need to get this message across, that it is not okay to target and kill journalists who are working in conflict zones.
And it was astounding what Ban Ki-moon said in the video that he managed to record for you folks in terms of, you know, supporting that and World Press Day. So you've got a bit of momentum coming out of, you know, what's happened just with the 1 year anniversary here, as well as moving on to that. I'm sorry, but keep going about the
yeah, so, I mean, you know, that just spurred us on to think, okay, well, what is it we can do? And obviously, there are organizations like, you know, Committee to Protect Journalists and Human Rights Watch and Reporters Without Borders, and this is their day job. This is what they do, and they do a fantastic job. But I merely thought that given that, you know, many of us who are veteran journalists weren't aware of this going on in the background, we could use the groundswell of support from our colleagues just to raise awareness. So the three main points of the campaign is, one is an awareness campaign, both inside our own community, but also outside, so the general public understand the risks that are being taken. And secondly was to get a public diplomacy, you know, approaching member states of the UN Security Council, which is an ongoing discussion we're having, to try and look at a more formal way of protecting journalists. And there is a resolution, which is United Nations Security Council Resolution 1738, which was put together in 2006, which in itself is very, very good, but we're wondering whether or not that could be strengthened. So we're looking at a way to formally, you know, have an agenda there that will increase the protection of our colleagues. And lastly, and this is probably the hardest one, is that we wanted to work with perhaps someone like Columbia University, who we're speaking to, with their law school and their journalism school, to start to try and build evidence that might help us build a case so that somebody would be prosecuted for one of these war crimes. Obviously, starting with Remy and Marie, because that's, you know, recent, and we know we have Paul Conroy's report and others. But looking at cases that, again, the CPJ and Reporters Without Borders have been helping us with, to identify certain cases that we think we might be able to obtain and get an evidence that would allow us to prosecute these.
Well, it's an important issue, and as a journalist, I'm glad you're on our side here. We've been speaking with Aidan Sullivan of the website and movement A Day Without News. Their website is adaywithoutnews.com. Urge all of our viewers to please visit the site and express your support. Aidan, thank you so much for joining us.
Absolute pleasure. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And we'll be back after this with a look at the ways in which the internet is changing to watch you even more closely than it currently does. Our tech wizard John Jackson joins us from Hong Kong. You're watching Worldview with Dennis Campbell.